It takes you 10 weeks to make crap. It takes me 5 days. I forgive the whole world. But these 5 people, I'll take them to the grave with me. You're kidding at 92, Carol Burnett. The iconic American comedian for the first time names the 5 people who dragged her into the deepest depths of hell. Why did she say that? Because they nearly drove her to suicide. They mocked her body, her age, her wrinkles. They took away what she cherished most, her trust. But she stood back up, still laughed, still performed, still became immortal. Yet under the spotlight, she was once publicly humiliated. On live television, betrayed by a close friend who leaked her private diary to the tabloids. Had a role stolen from her in a movie she wrote herself, manipulated by a media mogul who twisted her words and buried her reputation for a decade. And worst of all, the man she loved most shattered her entire career with a backstab no one saw coming. Carol Burnett, the comedian who brought laughter to all of Hollywood, cried alone every night. Why? She was born in 1933 in Texas, a little girl raised in poverty, surrounded by her mother's drunken stupors and midnight screams. A daughter who watched her father die from alcoholism before she turned 30, a single mother, hiding her tears as her daughter drowned in addiction and died at 38. An artist smeared by the press as drunk and promiscuous simply because she dared to demand respect in her craft. From those painful cracks, a fire ignited. She wrote, she performed. She carved her own path in a world where comedy was a man's game. Carol stepped in and crushed every stereotype. That's how legends are made. The Carol Burnett Show, 11 Golden Seasons, 25 Emmy Awards, 7 Golden Globes, and a prestigious Grammy. Her name engraved on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by George W. Bush in 2005. In a blazing spotlight no one else ever reached. Why does a comedy legend like Carol Burnett still harbor such fury for 5 fellow actors? And what kept her silent for decades until at 92 she finally named the one who controlled, betrayed, and hurt her the most? And who was the first a dark monster of all Hollywood? Little girls. Little girls everywhere. I turned the first betrayer. Joe Hamilton, ex-husband, the bloody betrayal. They were once destined for each other. Joe Hamilton, the brilliant producer behind the Carol Burnett Show, was also the only man Carol ever called her twin soul. He lifted her from an unknown actress to a television icon. They married in 1963, had 3 children together, and built the biggest comedy empire in America at the time. But that very man hurt Carol the most. Joe cheated not once, but repeatedly. He used his role as producer to control her, from scripts to costumes to casting. And the biggest blow, Joe secretly signed over control of the show to a third party, pushing Carol out of her own creation. Carol lost her power, her voice, and her marriage, but she stayed silent for the sake of the kids until one day she discovered Joe was preparing a new show, and the lead actress was the same woman he had slept with. While Carol was pregnant, Carol filed for divorce, but the price she paid was steep. 10 years of a stalled career, the psychological death of a woman turned into a puppet by the man she loved most, and hundreds of headlines calling her a leech on her ex. Has been queen, a bitter old hag. I forgive strangers, but I can't forgive someone who looked me in the eye and promised to protect me for life. He was the first, the one she gave all her trust to, but the second her own flesh and blood, a sister who chose to stab her in the back with words, deliberately aiming to destroy Carol with a single deadly strike. The second betrayer, Lucille Ball, Hollywood's big sister who crushed her heir to the public. Lucille Ball was the queen of early comedy, the trailblazer who paved the way for women like Carol Burnett. Carol herself once said, if there hadn't been a Lucy, there wouldn't be a me. They once laughed together, performed together. Lucy even appeared on the Carol Burnett Show as a symbol of solidarity, but only Carol didn't know Lucy never accepted having a successor. When Carol started to rise, Lucy's demeanor changed. In 1969, Carol Burnett received an unimaginable offer, a leading role in an MGM feature film, a project predicted to launch her from television to the big screen, rivaling box office queens. The director, a legend who had worked with Betty Davis. The budget, over $10 million, a colossal figure for the time. The media dubbed it the cannon shot. to start the Carol Burnett era on the silver screen, but just a week later, the role vanished from her hands. The reason: a single phone call from Lucille Ball, Lucy, personally called the executive producer and warned she's a TV talent, not a film actress. She can't sell tickets. If you cast her, you will sink. And just like that, Carol was replaced. That blow buried the only real shot Carol ever had at a film career. From that moment, Hollywood labeled her fit only for television a death sentence. For anyone dreaming of stardom, Carol never rose to A-list film status. And it wasn't until 40 years later that she learned it was Lucy who sealed her fate in a handwritten letter. Carol wrote, "I wasn't jealous of her, I adored her. But maybe Hollywood couldn't stand to funny women sharing the spotlight. The second betrayer didn't just stab Carol in the back, she clipped her wings mid-flight. But while that kind of sabotage could still be hidden, the third betrayer, he slapped her behind in front of millions and turned an icon into a cheap punchline in an instant. The third betrayer, Johnny Carson, the king of late night who erased it all. Carol Burnett was once a frequent guest on The Tonight Show, but one appearance turned her into the worst guest in Tonight Show history. On stage, Johnny Carson, the TV icon and gatekeeper who introduced Carol to mainstream audiences, humiliated her in front of millions. Honestly, she doesn't quite get what makes something funny. Personally, I think the real reason people laugh when she performs is those buck teeth of hers. The entire studio erupted in laughter. The camera panned to Carol. She forced a smile, but inside, humiliation surged. After the show, she questioned her own worth, asking herself if she'd truly become someone people only laughed at with scorn. Worse, yet the clip was replayed nationwide, becoming a viral meme mocking her as the failed funny woman. In her memoir, she admitted, "I don't fear criticism, but what breaks you is being dismissed by the very person who once welcomed you." Johnny didn't argue or attack. He just used the chairman smirked enough to quietly erase Carol Burnett's talent and dignity in the public eye. And now the fourth betrayer was a force of total silence. He didn't say a word, but his gaze alone made Carol wish she could disappear forever. The fourth betrayer, Bette Davis, the queen of silence, who made Carol want to vanish. No insults, no violence, just a glance cold as steel, enough to make Carol Burnett feel she didn't deserve to exist on stage. Bette Davis, the legendary screen goddess, once Carol's childhood idol. When Carol was invited to perform in a special alongside Davis, she cried tears of joy. This was sacred, the chance to stand beside America's queen of acting. But the moment Carol stepped into the rehearsal room, Bette glanced at her, then turned away. No greeting, no handshake. Every time Carol rehearsed a comedy segment, Davis would just glance, then pull out a newspaper to read. When the director asked, "Can you two interact more?" Davis replied, "I don't interact with clowns." On the main stage, Carol smiled, stepped back to let Bette search for her eyes to connect. But all she got was a wall of ice. After filming wrapped, Bette Davis told the director, "Next time, if you need a clown for background noise, pick someone less pathetic." Carol said nothing. She quietly left the set and went home to cry alone for a whole year afterward. She refused all offers to collaborate with veteran actresses. Rumors swirled around Hollywood that Carol's just not on the same level to act with. The greats, some wounds don't need blood, just one look and you feel invisible. The fourth betrayer needed no scandal, no headlines. It was Bette Davis's ruthless silence that became a lifelong shadow Carol carried, and if a glance could kill, then the fifth betrayer was the one who held Carol's hand every night, embraced her every morning, and struck the final blow when she was at her most fragile. The fifth betrayer, Carrie Hamilton, her only daughter, her deepest wound. Carol's beloved daughter, was once the light of her life, but at just 13, Carrie fell into drug addiction, ran away from home, and publicly declared, "I don't know who my mother is. She lives a double life." Those words spread across headlines, stabbing Carol's heart like 1,000 needles. Her reputation crumbled at its peak. Audiences began to doubt her. Television contracts were frozen. Though mother and daughter later reconciled, Carrie passed away from cancer in 2000, to leaving a void in Carol's heart that would never be filled. She wrote, "I forgive the whole world, but with my daughter, all I have left Is pain betrayal from the world she could endure, but betrayal from her own flesh and blood? Was the fatal blow a betraying husband, a fallen idol, a humiliating friend, a cold icon, and a daughter? Who shattered her heart 5 stabs 5 times? Carol Burnett nearly couldn't rise again. But she endured, still stood on stage, still made the world laugh, even while her heart bled, not for pity, but to reclaim her voice, to remind Hollywood. I was knocked down, but I didn't disappear. Who do you think hurt her the most? Comment and share. Because sometimes one person's pain becomes a lesson for an entire generation.